If you're on TikTok, chances are you've come across the discussion of the Karen Reed case, which we were kind of just talking about, but if you missed it, let's get into the details of what's going on here. So Karen Reed is currently on trial for the alleged murder of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. He was found dead outside a Massachusetts home in January of 2022, and prosecutors claim that Reed struck O'Keefe, so she hit her boyfriend, with her SUV and left him to die, while the defense argues she is being framed in a police cover-up.
So my understanding of it, very cold night, it was a winter night, middle of January. There was a party going on in the house where they all were. She left, there was some tension between her and the boyfriend, and I haven't been following the second trial very closely, but I know that there's some incriminating voicemails that she left him right after it allegedly happened, some angry voicemails. I'm home alone with your kids, that kind of thing.
After the incident?
After the alleged incident, yes, exactly. And so another piece of background here is that the first trial got all kinds of eyeballs on it, and it ended in a hung jury. So this is the second trial. And one of the things that has surprised me as we bring in Karen Conti, our legal analyst, to talk about this. Karen, one of the things that has surprised me about this is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't she been speaking to the media right after court on some days?
Yeah, well, she's been speaking to the media throughout this entire process. And that's always really perilous. I mean, you don't do that if you're a defendant. Why? Because, and this is what the prosecution is doing, they're taking those media accounts and those interviews that she gave, and they're playing them for the jury. And if any of the evidence deviates from what she is saying, then the jury can suspect that she's lying. And the other thing is, if she's not going to testify at trial, and the jury's sitting there watching her talk to CNN, then, they're probably going to be angry that she's not testifying in front of them. So there's a whole host of problems when you do media interviews as a defendant.
So why would she do them, though? Because everything is very intentional when it comes to these trials. Why would she be doing that?
It's hard to say. Maybe the lawyer seems to think differently, but the traditional theory is the more you say, the more you can be impeached. Impeached meaning someone can say, hey, listen, she said this on one day, she said that on another day, and then the third witness said something completely different.
Yeah.
And that is a real problem when you're defending a case.
So Reed got a new lawyer. Do we know why? Is this strange? Was this expected?
Sometimes the defendant maybe has exhausted their relationship with that person, and maybe she has a different way she wants the case tried. She's a very intelligent woman and very educated, so she might have a say in how things go. But yeah, the prosecution is a new prosecutor, the defense is a new defense lawyer, and I think that you might see some changes in how the strategy is presented to the jury.
How do you think this came to end in a hung jury the first time around, Karen?
Well, clearly they couldn't agree on a verdict. And, you look at all of these facts here and, they go all different ways. There's some of the things that she said and the videotapes and the audio tapes of her from that night saying, I hit him. Well, that's pretty compelling. On the other hand, there was a lot of strange things that went on with the police department and how they processed the crime scene. So when you're talking about reasonable doubt, there obviously was some there for at least some of the jurors.
Were we just looking at the live view from that night? Was that the back of the vehicle? So are they saying she backed into him? I hit him. I'm just curious about the details.
Yeah, I believe so. Karen, is that correct?
I think that's the case, and I've never actually seen that before.
Whoa. Very interesting. Okay, so are both sides allowed to present different theories and different defenses, or are they bound by how they presented the evidence in the first trial, the first time around?
In a retrial, you regularly see the prosecution take a different avenue, and you regularly see the defense do it. Why? Because they can. I mean, the only thing that they're bound by, and this is more strategic than legal, is that you don't want to have witnesses in the first trial come to the second trial and say something different, because now we have transcripts of what happened in the first trial, and a good lawyer will put that person on the stand and say, sir, didn't you say this at the first trial and now you're saying this? well, that really impugns their credibility or their memory, which happens, after a certain number of years go by, people's memories get skewed. So you can have a completely different theory, but you got to be careful not to have your witness say something completely different than they said in the first trial.
Karen, what was your reaction to the hung jury in the first trial? Did it surprise you? Did you expect this to go prosecutors' way?
I am not surprised that it was a hung jury. And, when you have the scrutiny of social media and the media on cases like this, I think the jurors really strive to do a better job. I think jurors always do a good job. I think they're conscientious people. I think they're charged with really important things, and they get that. But when you have that spotlight on it, and maybe their family members are watching it, and maybe the public is watching it, and so that puts a lot of pressure on them to really over-scrutinize the case. And I think they pay more attention to that beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not a whodunit anymore. It's did the prosecution meet their burden? And that doesn't surprise me in a case with this amount of media attention.
Speaking of media attention, Karen, what does that do? This is the second trial. Obviously, that first trial got so many eyeballs on it because of the compelling nature of this case. So unusual. What does the notoriety and the fact that she's, people will recognize her face at this point, how does that impact the jury and the whole process this second time around?
Well, in a case where the pretrial publicity is positive, and she's had both, but a lot of it is really positive. I mean, she raised $900,000 for her defense fund. So there are a lot of people out there who think that she's innocent and that she was framed. And I think that when you have positive media attention, that really does make the jury scrutinize the case better and really focus on that reasonable doubt piece. But if it's really bad pretrial publicity, like say in the Diddy case, where all of those horrible videos and all those allegations are being made, and a juror comes into the case, they may have that opposite. They may say, hey, I already saw that horror. I already saw him do something violent. I'm really predisposed, to convict him. So I think good pretrial press is good for the jury.
Yeah. So there's an attorney named Victoria George who served as an alternate juror in the first trial, but now she's added to Reese's defense team. Have you ever seen this before? That's an interesting turn.
It is so interesting. Actually, there's one state, Connecticut, has outlawed lawyers from doing that. And I don't really understand why. But who would be the best person to have as your jury consultant?
Right.
Someone who sat through that first trial, who's a lawyer, by the way.
Yeah.
And she's the one who sat there and watched as a neutral third party the prosecution's case, the defense case, and she obviously has a really good feel for what happened. So I think it's brilliant, and I think it's really going to help the defense and how they strategize.
Wow, it's a very shrewd move. They're in the room where it happened. They had a front row seat to everything.
Where the holes are, and I bet they can make a movie out of this.
It has all the makings of the movie. Karen, what's your opinion on this? What about this case do you think has made it such a media sensation?
Well, it's got all the food groups, right? You've got an attractive woman, right? She's in the defense. The deceased is a good-looking man. These are smart people. There's drugs and alcohol. There's frame up. It's got all the pieces here. Yeah. And I think that certain defendants just really capture the camera, and when that happens, you've got attention on it in a good way. I mean, I think Karen Reed is really benefiting from the spotlight that's being put on her case.
Before we let you go, on that note, some of what you just said kind of rang true to me with this whole Luigi Mangione thing. In terms of being photogenic and this, would you put that in the same category where there's some, I mean, I know not all of it is positive, but there's some positive media coverage with regard to his motives and everything?
Absolutely. I mean, good-looking people capture the camera, and he's a handsome guy. In his case, though, we had all these other issues of insurance companies and people hating insurance companies, even though the evidence against him is pretty damning. But in this case, we have that cover-up of the police, and there are a lot of people out there who think the police cover up crimes, and so I think these issues, and not just the defendant and how they look, but like the issues, the core issues that people care about, if they're in that case, they're going to be followed.
It's got all the ingredients. Karen Conti, it's always so fascinating to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Chicago Now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.